Okay, so today we're going to be talking about planning and pacing with Voces. Um, the agenda, as you can see, we have a lot to cover. Everything I'm going to be talking about is applicable to all of our titles. So it's going to be a little bit, um, like sometimes I'll mention that it's only found in the Our Story series. I'll try to mention when it's only found in the grammar-based series, etc. But like, just keep in mind that for the most part, it's applicable to all. Um, so let's begin. We're going to start with just preparing for planning. So if you're new to Voces, which a lot of you guys are, I think, then it's so important to just spend time exploring the title that you're going to be using and getting to know the content, because like that's what, the person who used Voces for the last 3 years kind of has over you, is that they are so familiar with the content that planning and pacing and figuring out what they're going to do first and so forth is just much easier. So spend time exploring the title that you're going to be working in. And what I want to talk about right now is considering what is essential and what is optional in each unit, because a very important point that is like so important to keep in mind is that you do not have to do everything in a unit. And if you try to do that, you might lose your mind. So, like, we have so much stuff in there, and it's really all about you choosing what you want to use with your students. Like, what do your students respond to well? What does your department need of you, etc. So let's talk about what's essential. I just thought this picture is kind of cute, like the core material. In the Our Story series, the short story sections are essential. Not everything within those sections is essential, but the short story sections introduce that vocabulary and do so slowly, like in each short story section. And so anything else, I mean, if you're doing that will ensure that your students are going to be progressing through the curriculum kind of appropriately, being exposed to all the structures. Similarly, in the Voices of the World series, like Voces por el Mundo, and our French series, and even like our introductory series, it's going to be like what's essential is like the lesson of every chapter, which is going to focus on the grammar and vocabulary. There's a lot of additional materials around that, but like, you in order for the students to progress, they need to know that core material. So giving you an idea of where that is in each title. Here are the short story sections within, I think this is like Nuestra Historia 2. It looks very similar in the French and in the Italian and German. And here are some of the lesson pages within, I believe, Voces por el Mundo 1. So just keep that in mind when you're planning. And what else is essential? I mean, to some degree, it's up to you, but I would say that, of course, you're going to want to reinforce the lessons with activities. So in the grammar-based titles, the activities are going to be also quite essential. The comprehension activities within the Nuestra Historia or the Our Story series are going to be essential, and assessment. And we're going to return to assessment in this presentation and talk a bit about that. As well as culture. I mean, culture is embedded within Voces and all the titles. So whether you like it or not, you're going to be teaching culture. But I think it's important to consider, like which elements are you going to include to really build out that experience for your students. But then what is optional? So in the Our Story series, the long stories in the lower levels, there are 4 of them. Like, that's a lot of stories. I mean, it's wonderful if you have like ravenous readers or just a lot of time, but you probably don't need to do all of them. So, you can, as you're planning, you should like read the long stories and consider like which ones will my students like the best, or which ones do you like the best? Which ones can you identify with and maybe elaborate on more easily with your students? The same thing with the extra materials in the Our Story series. That's like the section with lots of authentic material, interviews with native speakers, interpersonal speaking prompts, like really rich, wonderful material, but you probably don't have time to do it all. So look at it closely, find your favorites, kind of get a read on what students enjoy doing from there, and, kind of make decisions based on that. In the other series, there's travel or country sections with a lot of stuff and activities. So it's like, you might want to spend a long time there, you might not, it's kind of optional. The interviews, there are actually stories in like Voces por el Mundo 1 and 2, but the stories in those series are very much, not central to the curriculum. So they're like supplemental. So a lot of the material in every unit is supplement. And I guess this actually, like, again, like I'm speaking mostly to people who are new to Voces because it's not so obvious when you're first logging in. Like Voces is a textbook, but it's also your workbook, and it's also, you know, like your bag of supplements and your game, you know, box of games or whatever. Like it's everything in one place. So if you see it as something that you have to like check off everything on, you're never going to get through it. But if you see it and understand it for this is like what's key and essential, and this is what I can like swap in and make, you know, do fun things with, I think you're going to be like just in a much better place with planning. So looking at a few table of contents, some of the things that are optional, the long story, the extra, the authentic materials, and like the more grammar-based titles, the cultural exploration, interviews, etc. Also, we have like video series and can-dos, which I'll get back to as well. And that's an option. You can either use the can-dos or you don't have to. And more like authentic tasks. To some degree, they're optional. I mean, if you decide to do them, then you know you should have a plan to do them. But yeah, they're like additional elements. The video series, especially the Go Viva Tu Manera, that's in all the Spanish titles, like that are, I think it's in like Nuestra, like I don't know if it's not in Primaria, but it's in like the higher level ones, and it's such a wonderful series and is broken down into parts and like very scaffolded for students. So I highly recommend you checking that out. So tips for understanding what's in a title, because if you're new to Voces, and I'm looking at the chat really quick, but if you're new to Voces, it's hard to know, you know, like, how do I even understand what is all in here? So before I just want to, so someone is asking really quick, oh yes, I can make it bigger, sorry. Do you guys see the whole thing now? Okay. I have a huge screen and it's kind of confusing when I share my screen. Yeah, so thank you, Hannah, for answering. Our pacing guide does suggest 6 weeks for a unit, but it is definitely taking longer. I think I was saying this yesterday during a presentation that, as you all probably have experienced, after the pandemic, everything just takes a little bit longer. And you know, teachers are just finding that they have to go a lot slower. So I wouldn't hold just, I mean, you know, I think 4 units within a year for like an Our Story series is probably a more close, like is closer to average now. But you know, it does depend on what you like supplement it with and other things that you do. So yeah, I mean, not to not answer that question, but like it is a pretty variable question, but we'll look at the pacing guides and it will give you some ideas. So tips for understanding what's in a title: go to the scope and sequence. And that's cool, Alicia. That's a great point. 2 to 3 units and then 2 novels. So the scope and sequence is a great place to like get an overview of what's covered in every unit or chapter. There's a full outline, and actually I need to show you guys. Sorry, I'm gonna make this small again because I want to actually show you on. So I'll do this. So if you log in, you can see where if you go to my screen is huge. If you log in and you hover over the teachers panel and click on resources, you'll have access to all these wonderful resources, which I'll be referring to today. And if you look here, you'll see that we have like the pacing guides are here, the scope and sequence, and outside, I just realized there is a full, like if you go on our website into the Voces library, so you log out and go to the Voces library and go to your specific titles, you'll see, sorry, it's taking a moment. You'll see a full outline, and the full outline is like literally like the table of contents, like a, you know, it's like an accordion. So it's like a table of contents completely stretched out and all in one Word doc. So a lot of teachers like to print out the full outline. It's right here. And that just enables them to like write on it and cross things off and circle things, and just gives them like a little bit of a different access or understanding of the material. So just keep in mind that that's there as well. Sorry. I think I went ahead. Okay. And then the detailed pacing guides. Yeah. And then the search feature. If you log into any of the titles, you can hover over the tools icon and you'll see the search button. You click it and you can type in whatever term or word that you're looking for, and you'll see not only results for that title, but in other titles as well. So it just like really kind of helps you start to unpack and understand what's in a title. And remember, as I mentioned earlier, Voces isn't prescriptive. Any planning or pacing considerations really begin with you. And you have to ask yourself, like, what do you want to teach? What do your students need? And make decisions based on that. Your goal should not be to get through the material, like all the material in a title. So another quick note, because this comes up, it was actually what I was adding right before is this slide, because it came up in an email from someone today. They were asking if they could use more than one title, and it comes up a lot because we have, like there's like appeal, like there's something that is appealing about multiple titles, right? The answer, in my opinion, I mean, you can use two titles if you want completely, but if you do, my opinion is that you need to choose one as your base curriculum and then supplement with the other, so that like you're doing most of your stuff, for instance, in Nuestra Historia 1, but you might be supplementing with some of the material in Voces Pro Mundo 1, or vice versa. You can copy classes, like once you add your classes into one title, you can copy them from one title to the other, so that students will then have access to both titles when they go to log in. So that's something to keep in mind, and we can always show you how to do that if you need help. And you can even share pages from one title to the other. Again, we can help you with the process when the time comes, but just know that if you wanted to put a grammar lesson from Voces Pro Mundo 1 into Nuestra Historia 1, then you could share those pages from one to the other, and then students could access them in Nuestra Historia 1. So just a few things to keep in mind. Okay, so we're prepared, like that's like preparing for planning. You just have to know what you're working with, right? Then you need to ask yourself how you will assess, because that's, of course, where your students are going. That's the path that you're taking. Like that's going to determine the path you're taking them on. So we have many options for assessment. You may have noticed already. And just like before, it's up to you how you decide to assess. In almost all of our titles, we have integrated performance assessments. These are wonderful, like authentic tasks that are setting students in a specific context, having them imagine themselves in these places that they're learning about, doing things, using the language. I think they're like super appealing. Like I think I would have loved them as a student. And they always hit 3 modes at least. So interpretive, interpersonal, and presentational. If you decide to assess with an integrated performance assessment, then you definitely need to introduce students to those types of tasks ahead of time. So you need to make plans to include some of those like more authentic communicative tasks that we have within the unit or chapter. And in both, like in all of our titles, we have those tasks built, like kind of woven into the units, so that students can get used to doing them, and then we'll have more success on the assessment. So I feel like there's something else I was going to say, but yeah, the interpretive or integrated performance assessments, I think, are just such a wonderful rounded out experience for students. But again, you have to kind of prepare them, get them exposed to some of those authentic materials, and authentic tasks like speaking and writing emails, etc. The next one is the long stories. This is specific only to the Our Story series. These incorporate all or most of the structures in the unit. This was what I had said earlier was optional, which it is, but if you want to use it as an assessment, it's a totally wonderful way to use a long story. Like you wouldn't teach it during the unit, you would save it. You could actually make it teacher only so students couldn't see it. And then what you do is you just would assign like the story, and I'm just looking at this example here, you would assign that page and then maybe like 1 or 2 or 3 activities, whatever you think is best, and they would do it, they would do those activities independently. You know, you wouldn't be like reading the story and guiding them through it. They would read it on their own and complete the activities. And this would be after doing all the short story sections. So whatever structures are being targeted in that long story, they have at that point seen before and experienced multiple times. So I think that's like a very great way to assess, especially in the, or like only really, and only applicable to the Our Story series. Another one, which is applicable to all the series, is the unit evaluations or exams. A few people yesterday, I believe, when I mentioned the ones in the Our Story series were like, oh, I didn't know those were there, because we added them like just a few years ago and they were kind of buried for a while, but they should be there. And if they aren't, let me know. They're in all the titles. There's a vocabulary section, reading, writing, and then culture. In the more grammar-based titles, the exams are like straightforward, mostly auto-graded, multiple choice type of exams that assess on all the like whatever grammar was taught in that chapter and whatever vocabulary. So really straight, like, you know, to the point and familiar. And these can also be used as placement exams if you want. I mean, they can kind of like be repurposed as such. If you're looking to like figure out where students like, you know, if you're not sure about the level that your students are at. Then there's the My Story prompt, which is in the Our Story series only. And these are, they consist of a writing prompt asking students to write a story using the vocabulary from the unit, because they've like, you know, been exposed to all this vocabulary in the stories. So then it's like kind of their turn to write a story. And you can have the students record their story too, so they get some speaking practice. These are similar to a free write and, you know, a CI classroom, and they're pretty straightforward and customizable. And then of course you can also combine them, I misspelled that, or make your own. So, I mean, we talked about the editor, or Neil talked about the editor on Tuesday. And again, we can always do a refresher course over the phone or email or Zoom or something if you ever need it. But just remember that you have the editor, you have all these wonderful different assessments and activities that you may have not used throughout the chapter. If you wanted to create your own page, and then you can even, and I'm trying to show it here in the screenshot, you can import specific questions from like another page in Voces onto the page you're making. So it takes some getting used to, but if you start to like have a really good idea of like how you want to take some of these questions from, you know, an activity that they did on a specific grammar point, and some of these questions from an authentic material or something, you can combine all of that into one, and you can even like then write your own too. So it can just really be your own creation and specific to your students' needs and everything. So just know that's an option. It's a wonderful one, but it takes a little bit of practice to get there. And I'm not looking at the chat, so I apologize. Okay, I'm gonna wait on the chat only because it gets me sucked in for a minute and kind of has me lose my place, but I will answer questions at the end too. And I'm assuming that a few of the Voces team members are helping out with some answers too. But yes, I'll get to some. I feel like they're really good questions. Okay, so now we've decided how we will assess, and now we're going to consider, you know, how to start a unit, because it's all about kind of, you know, the entry point, like how do we begin? And again, there's like lots of options and it's really up to you which options you do. I'm sure that, I mean, I would love actually for people who use Voces to put in what they do to start a unit, like what are some of their routines. We're gonna begin by talking about the can do pre-assessment. This is in all titles. Honestly, like I sometimes kind of forget about the pre-assessment because it's something we've always had there. But this is really effective in getting students to set goals and reflect on their learning. It gives them a glimpse into some of the tasks and expectations that, you know, you will have of them in that unit. It just kind of prepares, like sets the table in a sense for the unit. And it really helps them to identify their own proficiency and take more ownership in their learning. So they do the pre-assessment, they complete the different tasks throughout the unit, They can look at their progress and the can-do checklists in every chapter. And it's just like a really great way for them to, see that progress themselves. Also, it's all editable. So if you needed to like add your own can-dos, or if you wanted to delete some of ours, you can do all that as well. And Martha, I'm assuming like those are anyways, I feel like you're helping out by sharing what you do. So thank you. You can also start a unit by focusing on the culture or countries that will be featured in that unit. And all of our titles open with this kind of material. And a lot of times we have a ton of it. So, it's kind of like you pick and choose what works best for you. You can project the images and talk about them. They all have maps of the country. So you can project the map and talk about the maps, the cities, the mountains, etc. You can do that. There's always activities. So like, I'm not, of course, logged into the title, but on this introduction to Guatemala page, I believe at that bottom of the page, there's activities that like have students just like answering basic information that was presented on the page about Guatemala. I know in in the Our Story series, we absolutely have like lots of questions that you can ask the students in class with like a slideshow. We also have activities that students can, complete on their own. And a lot of times we have a survey that's like, would you want to go here? And it starts to get students their opinions, like, would you like to travel here someday? And inspires them maybe to want to learn the language even more because they want to go to these beautiful places. And then you can also start to compare, between what they're learning about in these other countries and what's in their own country or community. And that's helpful, especially if they continue on to AP where they have to do intercultural comparisons. So there's that. Then there's also presentations or special person interviews. So this is where we were talking about Bryce Hedstrom at the beginning, and this is where I mentioned him. But I'll start by saying that many of the titles, well, in a sense, all of the titles have presentations. The grammar-based titles often have like grammar or vocabulary presentations, like this is a picture of one. Very straightforward, a wonderful way to introduce those grammatical concepts or vocabulary to your students. The Our Story series will have personal question scripts. So those are within the short story sections. They're there are presentations that you can project and read from and ask students questions and learn more about them, all the while targeting those structures that they will see in the story. And something that comes up a lot in our detailed pacing guide for the Our Story series is to use special person interviews as like part of your routine. And it's not only just for starting a unit, it could just be for starting your class period, where you identify, you choose a student and you ask some questions, and we have some scripts and more information about how to do that online. And Bryce Hedstrom absolutely has that information on his website, which is a link to it there. But that's a really wonderful way to, start a unit or start a class. And then there are essential questions. These are only in the Our Story series, but they're at the very beginning of the unit. And all the material within the unit was written through the lens of the essential questions that are presented at the beginning. So writing those on the board or projecting them, they often have these like really nice pictures, is a great way to just kind of set the scene basically for the unit. You can talk to the students about them. You can have them make predictions based on the questions like, what types of stories might we be reading, in this unit. And then later on at the end of the unit, you could even return to those questions and talk about how the stories like reflected or explored those questions in different ways. So it's like a nice in-depth way of beginning a unit. I feel like everyone's sharing some really good ideas. So I thank you so much. I love it. Because I do think we're a mix of like teachers that are very new to Voces and those who aren't. And so like the ones who have that experience, it's just so wonderful that you're sharing what you've done with others. So thank you. Another way that you can start a unit is with the songs. Unfortunately, we don't have them in every unit. We're still working on it, but the ones that we have are so wonderful. We had some very talented songwriters and musicians compose them for us and write them. They're based on the vocabulary of the unit and the theme. So, I mean, you could get into the routine of playing that song when the students walk in. You can, of course, have like a focused lesson on it at the beginning of a unit. There's activities with the songs and all sorts of cool stuff. So that's another option. Okay, so now we have talked about assessing and starting the unit. Now let's unpack the Voces pacing guides. And this is really like the part where you guys need to look at those pacing guides for your unique title, like your specific title, and dig in and get an idea of what we are recommending in them. So let me go over some with you. I don't want to, well, to begin with, and I'm gonna like go into the pacing guides themselves in a second, but I just want to mention that all the titles, except for introductory Spanish and French, have two pacing guides. One is the detailed pacing guide, and it focuses on one unit or chapter, and it shows how you could take almost everything in that unit or chapter and string it out over, I believe, 6 weeks. And then the profile based, which gives you these options, and I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but well, let's focus on the detailed pacing guide first. So it's very prescriptive. I'm gonna do this, and it's very prescriptive. It's very like thorough, but what I want to emphasize to you is, oh, of course, that's tiny. Is that like super tiny on your screen? Yeah. Okay, well, I'll show you where they are. So that you can look at them on your own, because of course, there's one for every title. So it's kind of like, to look too closely at it means that we're excluding everyone that's not using that specific title. But I'm going to look at Nuestra Historia 1, and I'm logging in. And if you go into any title and you go to the teachers panel and then click resources, you should find the pacing guides. So I guess like, since we can't really look that closely, I do want to just mention with the detailed pacing guide, it is worth your time to like read over the material that we say before, we get to the detailed pacing guide. Like, we're talking about how the different like components of a unit work together. So that's going to give you a really good idea of how to pace your own material or your own class. And, just things to consider, like a class routine and the Voces Game Center, etc. And then we string it together. And I know you guys can't see this in detail. It might just be a blur on your screen, but I just want to like look at it as I tell you that, we break it down by the minute. It's like spend 10 to 15 minutes, doing the preguntas personales, like the personalized questions, PQAs, project this for the class. So it's telling you not only like what to do, but kind of how to do it. And it's not that you have to do it that way, but I would say that like it's reminding you that the students shouldn't just be like logged in all the time, that a lot of times they should not have their devices and they should just be looking at you, and you should be orchestrating like the discussion. But then there are also times when they should log in, so give you a break and they can do an activity. So we kind of like fold these different, activities and elements into a day, into a class period rather, and then, show you how it can build up over a course of a week. We give you some ideas on using exit tickets, which we have in our resources section, but you could also just make yourself on like scrap paper. We talk about how you could maybe like make Friday like a video, like always have a video or something fun and different on a Friday, and like kind of take a break from the storytelling. Not that it's a bad thing, but just to mix it up, right? So it's really worth it to check these out, look closely at it, and get ideas from it. But don't feel like you have to follow it to a T. If you ever have any specific questions about your own, titles pacing guide, I'm happy to help you, and I can always get other teachers involved too. And maybe someday, Anna, we will get it for all chapters. But because it's not prescriptive, it gets, but I know what you're saying. So yes, I will keep that in mind for sure. So then on the other side, we have I just realized I have not looked at the time. Okay. On the other side of things, we have the profile-based pacing guide. So what's cool about this is that it really embraces the fact that Voces is not prescriptive. And it says, okay, like we understand that so many people are like, that there are so many different ways people can use Voces and situations and variables, like how often you might see your students, how long you might see them, the program they're in, like how much exposure have they had to the language prior to this, moment that you get them. Also, and probably key, how much do you plan to supplement with Voces? Some people, like always do a huge project in the spring or something. Well, that's going to interrupt, like your use of Voces. So you need to adjust how you use it. And then even your access to technology, because that is a factor, even though I will say after the pandemic, there's so much more accessibility in terms of technology than before. But we still hear from teachers who like don't have reliable internet at their school, or the students don't have, devices every day. They only get them like every once in a while when they like get lucky, So how to work with those things, it's going to change how you use the curriculum. So that's why I love this pacing guide. I am looking at, yeah. So just to, again, I know you can't see this very well. But you should look at it for your title. It's in the resources. And I will say like there's like different profiles. So there's the rock skipper. So it's like, that's going to tell you what main elements you should do if you like use the curriculum every once in a while, but like not always. And sorry, I'm like trying to read and talk because anyways. And so it's kind of like, you're just skimming along the surface. Well, kind of similarly, there's another profile that's called surface skimmer. And that's where they use the curriculum as the backbone, but also supplement a lot with other additional materials. So you're not going to be doing everything in Voces, but you're still going to be using it as a guide. Then there's the profile called knee deep. So this is like all water related titles. But knee deep is when, you're using Voces as your primary curriculum, and you're taking like the essential stuff that I went over earlier, like you're using, but you still might be supplementing a little bit with other stuff. So it's just like, you're not going to be completely all in. And then finally, deep diver is like, you're completely all in. You're using everything within a title or as much as you possibly can, and you're supplementing with much less. So knowing that, then you can look at the one that you identify with the most, and it will talk about, what are the things, or like list the elements within a chapter or unit that you, should use, and roughly how long you should use it or implement it. So it just gives you like that another way to understand the material. It still will require you to like dig into the specific units and pick and choose like the specific stories and resources that you want to use, but it really kind of gives you like a broad overview of how you can use that curriculum. I love all the comments, but I'm missing a lot, so I apologize. Melissa, you're like, so that's a good question. Like the pacing guides are for 50 minutes for 90-minute classes, 2 to 3 times a week. Do I just double the days? I would do that, but do so with some consideration with like the routine that's kind of, built into those days, the 50-minute days. Like it won't work just to, like you need to like just adjust the routine, but I think that will help, for sure. And that's like actually a big part of those pacing guides, especially the detailed one, is just kind of seeing or imagining some of the different ways that you can like begin a class and move through a class and end a class, so that kids aren't getting like too bored, so that, learning is happening. So you're covering material, but you're also, getting some time to like take a breath yourself. And, just like there's all these elements to sort of keep in mind. So look at the detailed pacing guide with that in mind. And I think you can come up with a really good sort of formula for your unique situation. Okay, so, and yeah, like Jody said, I still plan to use my FDR library every class. And so, yeah, that's going to like work into your schedule. And I think that's great. I love that. So some advice for the Voces classroom, and I've said this now a few times, so it's a little bit repetitive, but I do want to emphasize that you should avoid only having students log in and complete their work independently. That has happened before because I think people think if it's online, the students log in and like do their work, like a Rosetta Stone type of situation, but it's not like always that at all. And it really is, meant to be delivered by a teacher. So you talk, you engage the students, you project a lot of it, or you write on the whiteboard, or you print out some things so that, you can hold them and look at them, or you can, your students can look at them and write on them. And then when it makes sense to do so, you assign them work and then they log in. And it is good to do that. So I don't mean to like say you shouldn't, but I just don't, I've heard from teachers that kind of mistakenly see it as that online program that students are just always logged into, and that's just not the case. So that also kind of bodes well for the situations when when teachers can't get the student accounts for some reason. They can just, project and print and work with what we have in that kind of space. It also bodes well for people who have internet issues at school. If you can, at least as a teacher, project, then the students don't have to rely on the internet as much at school, and they can do activities and homework at home. Okay, and then finally, and I'm told like there's going to be time for questions too, but this is, we talked about assessments and we talked about starting a unit, and we looked at the pacing guides. And now I would like to talk about a few ideas for like jazzing up, adding rigor, adding games, and subplans to Voces, which is a lot, and they're all different. But I would love to hear from you guys too. But a few ideas that I just want to share, and I mentioned this one too already, but to make Friday special. Or maybe make Monday special, but to make a day a little bit set apart from the regular routine, I think works well for jazzing things up and keeping things a bit like lively. So play a video, or give them reading time, do the FVR, maybe longer, take them outside to read. My friend who teaches near us here in Michigan, uh, before school ended, she was taking the students outside every day to read like in the beautiful sunshine and stuff. And it just sounded so pleasant. So yeah, just that's an idea for jazzing things up. For adding rigor, which is something that comes up a lot. It's like especially like some people who are new to comprehensible input might like sort of worry about the rigor in a sense. And I just want to say that like if you want to kind of like make things a little bit more difficult or like challenging in a sense, then one way to do that is the assignment wizard. You can really increase like up the bar using the assignment wizard by limiting their submissions, adding a timer, making it clear on retake so like they can't work off of if they have like multiple, if it's auto graded and they like put their responses in and then they submit, they'll see what they got right or wrong, but they'll not see their answers that they put in before. So they're kind of starting from scratch. So that's some other ideas for that. And then adding games, give incentives for high scores on one of the Voces games. We've heard of many teachers who do this and their kids get obsessed with the games, and then they might have like a party for the class that gets the highest points. And then Erica mentioned this yesterday, so I'm kind of stealing it, but use Bookit on sub days, and also see the ideas that we have in the resources. So we actually have substitute teacher plans, and it's just a whole bunch of ideas for like what you can do with Voces or with like outside of Voces when you have a sub. So consider those options, especially if you're not prepared. Like if you like, a lot of the ideas are things that you could put together in like 10 minutes, if you're not preparing for a sub and it's like an emergency. So what are some other ideas that you guys have for doing all those things or any of those things? And I see tons of messages that I'm not seeing, so I'll start looking. What do you guys do to like jazz things up? I would love to share, like for you to share some ideas. And I'm looking at all the chats and I'm like, whew, you guys were I'm sorry if I missed any important. If I did, and I just want to like make sure that you guys had this, I'm putting my email in the chat. Feel free to email me with anything that I did not get to or address specifically here. But yes, I see brain breaks. That's great. Yes. I mean, if you guys ever need ideas for brain breaks, I mean, you can Google them, but we're also actually compiling some ideas, and there are some that we might already have in the introduction section. So that's another place to explore, is like the resources for teachers section. We have a lot of material there, but brain breaks are great. I like that, Jill. For PQA, sometimes you do a survey for like with the whole class. Listen to music, dance, stretch. I love it, Martha. Yeah, music is so important. And I mean, it changes the mood, and it works on adults, it works on kids, and it's like such a wonderful thing to incorporate. Lawrence said he gives a 10-minute roundup competition once a week. Oh, cool. Nice. Using the game roundup. That's awesome. In our game center. We play Gimkit and create comic strips. Nice. I like that, Anna. The comic strips would be fun. Ask how many ceiling and floor tiles are there. That's funny. Is there a right answer to that when you do ask them that? Ed puzzle. Yes, like that's a nice change of pace for sure. And watching, oh, that's cool, like a cooking show. Your kids watch a cooking show. That's a great idea. Google Spanish slide projects are very popular with my middle schoolers. They get creative and love the show and tell aspect of it. That's a good, I mean, if you want to tell us a little bit more about that, like, do they get like a country and do a slideshow on that, or how does, but any kind of like project stuff is such a nice break for students. Jody, that's funny. They all end up with different number of tiles.
Hey, Aaron, can I jump in here for a second?
Absolutely.
So there was a question about the pre-assessments. So if you can go into Voces, do you have a pre-assessment that maybe you have some sample students that completed?
Oops. Probably not, but do you want me to?
Well, I can, if you want to let me share my screen, I can
absolutely.
show it.
Where is it? Like, where are the results?
The question was about printing the results. You are going to have to allow me to screen share. Aaron always does this with all of her meetings. I'm never allowed to screen share in them.
I like to control. No, I'm joking. I'll make you co-host, and I think that means that you'll be able to share your screen. Can you?
Yes. All right. So with the pre-assessment page, I just made an adjustment to the code so that this shows up. After students have completed it, there's nowhere really to see what the students put in other than going into grading and looking at the can-do summary, and then you see kind of their pre-assessment score next to their original, but without, or with what they submit afterwards. Without them submitting it afterwards, there's not really a good way to see the pre-assessment. So just as really kind of a quick fix, if you go to quick results, I just made it so that shows back up. So if you're on the pre-assessment page and go to quick results, you'll be able to see each class and then how many students selected each option. So it's not going to give you the breakdown of which students are at each level, but you'll be able to see that you've got 3 students here, 4 here, 5 here, 10 at this level sort of thing to give you a quick summary. As I mentioned in chat, I think that might just be a starting point. If you want to email me with kind of what you're looking for in that report, I can definitely make some more adjustments, but I just wanted to show that here instead of typing everything I just said in chat.
No, that's awesome. And the quick results, by the way, is like just a wonderful tool that you can use with any, like on any activity page. You can see the quick results for, you know, whatever students have done and just get like a good read on what they've done, how well they've done, who's done it, etc. Okay, I'm gonna stop recording and we can just open it up for we can talk about, you know, we can share ideas and